It's my great pleasure to introduce Hilary Burgin. She's the Executive Director of Quaker Voluntary Services, and she has a lot to share with us today, including a brief presentation that explains Quaker Voluntary Services so we can have a foundation. So welcome, Lori. So Hilary, if you would begin, that would be just great.
Hi, good morning. It's really nice to be with you. My name is Hilary, as Susan mentioned. I use she and her pronouns. I live in Boston, Massachusetts. I'm a member of Beacon Hill Friends Meeting. And I'm just really excited to be here with you for the Quaker Wider World. I am going to share my screen, and hopefully it means that you can, I hope that everybody in the big room can see. And if you can't, please do let me know and I can stop sharing it, because basically it's just, giving some words to what I'll be sharing, some written words. So can you see?
Yes.
Okay, good. So hi, I've been with Quaker Voluntary Service for 5.5 years, and I've been in this role as the executive director for 2.5 years. And I wanted to just give you kind of a brief introduction, hopefully 10 or 15 minutes, about what Quaker Voluntary Service is, and then mostly have a conversation with you all if you have questions or etc. Comments, ideas. So Quaker Voluntary Service, or QVS, is a year-long fellowship program for young adults, and it's an immersive experience at the intersection of transformational spirituality and activism. It's a capacity building program for nonprofit partners. We work with site placements, nonprofits in each of our cities, and it's a deeply Quaker experience. We began in 2012 with just one program, and now we have programs in 5 cities. So, as I said, we're just 9 years old. We started in Atlanta. The following year, we opened programs in Philadelphia and Portland. Several years ago, in 2015, we started a program in Boston, and then Minneapolis, St. Paul, the Twin Cities, and Minnesota is our most recent program. Each program is under the care of one or more Quaker Meeting and Friends Church. So local friends play an incredibly crucial part in welcoming and nurturing the young adult fellows throughout their QVS year. Between the 5 cities, we partner with over 15 Quaker Meetings and Friends Churches. And that's important because from the very beginning, one of the foci of QVS was that we were a cross-branch Quaker program. And we recruit young adults across the Quaker spiritual spectrum, and lots of young adults who are not Quaker. So there are 3 main parts of Quaker Voluntary Service. The first is intentional living, intentional community. So fellows live together in their program city. Between 6 and 8 young adults live together in Boston and Atlanta. So we have around 36 fellows across the country. They gather weekly for house worship, for decision making, and for shared meals. And there's also a staff person, the city coordinator, who meets with the fellows regularly. They meet one-on-one with each of the fellows every month. They plan twice monthly programming days. They structure seasonal retreats. So staff are really involved in the QVS fellows' lives. We've chosen intentional community as a major component of the program because, one, we see that life stage specific spiritual community really supports spiritual growth. Being in relationship with others, asking the same questions, seeking in the same kinds of ways, allows the young adults to dig deep together. And we also have a history as Quakers of Quaker service programs that started right after World War I, 1918. The American Friends Service Committee started programs, and they also were community based, and we see that those programs really formed lifelong bonds. So we want to be a part of making that happen. So intentional community, that's one major component. The second is our site placements, the nonprofits that we partner with. So in each of our 5 cities, we partner with nonprofits, and our goal is to provide capacity building support for those nonprofits. My feeling is that this program that we offer is needed now more than ever. Nonprofits are feeling a crunch because of instability of the last year with the pandemic, with job loss, stock markets going up and down. And so having a QVS fellow makes a big difference. When I spoke with Susan and Herb earlier, a week or 2 ago, I also heard that there are folks in this meeting involved with Alternatives to Violence Project and other programs like that. And so you have experience with some of the ways that Quakers are really in the world and changing the world. QVS, since we get to partner with over 30 organizations, it means that we're not just working on one issue area or one way of change making. Fellows work for a range of issues, and you can see here some of those issues. Oregon Physicians for Social Responsibilities, for instance, works with in advocacy, doing climate change work in Oregon. The Local Enterprise Assistance Fund offers support to businesses run by people of color and people from marginalized communities. L'Arche is a community made up of people with intellectual disabilities and people without intellectual disabilities. And L'Arche makes known the gifts of their community members and supports members in their whole lives. We work with the ACLU on voter registration in Atlanta. There's a site placement in Boston called Apprentice Learning, which supports young people in building skills. And those young people are, high school age, and then those kids are interning at other nonprofits. So I could go on. This is 6 of our sites, or a couple of our sites. You see photos from the second photo there, the advocate for international nuclear disarmament. That fellow is working for International Physicians for the IPPNW, Prevention of Nuclear War, IPPNW. There's a lot of acronyms. So my guess, I'm sure I could find the numbers someplace, but I think we've probably worked with over 60 organizations over the last 9 years, and really helping those organizations build capacity and do more than they could do without a fellow. Fellows are often working with the most vulnerable communities in a city. Their work really impacts people's lives. And the fellow isn't meant to take the place of an existing employee. So we're not taking from the community in that way. Fellows are also doing work that the community has asked for. So we're not setting the priorities of the nonprofit. We're saying you know what to do. So please help us help you. And this is incredibly impactful for fellows. Looking at the economic downturn of 2008, we know that young adults will be professionally impacted by the instability of this time in their early 20s more than anyone. And by serving at nonprofits, the fellows gain skills. They make relationships within the city. They have supervisors that can speak to their skills and to their work. And fellows are getting to test out leadings related to vocation. About half of our fellows are offered a position at their site placement when the year is over, which shows me that the fellows are valued by their site placements. So that's the second part of QVS. And then the third is our spirituality and Quakerism arena. And we ask fellows to quote unquote try on Quaker practices, Quaker worship with local friends on Zoom this year. And they also do have worship in the house once a week. They use Quaker business meetings and business processes for house discernment. They use tools such as clearness committees. And meanwhile, each of the fellows is paired with a local friend as their spiritual nurturer. And that's somebody who journeys alongside the fellows in their spiritual life, who's a part of both the local friends community and is also really thinking about what does it mean to support young adults in exploring their spiritual life. About half of our fellows arrive with some experience of Quakerism through growing up Quaker or attending Quaker camp or college, but fully half of the fellows are new to Quakerism and new to trying out any Quaker practices. So our fellows are seekers, just like Quakers in general. And we're really clear with incoming fellows, with applicants, that we are a Quaker program and we'll be using a Quaker lens. And as you can see, you know, alumni do go on to be more connected to Quakerism, but that's not the explicit goal. I really think the explicit goal is to provide tools for a life dedicated to spiritually grounded social justice work. And for some people, that path includes Quakerism more long-term, and for some, that's not the case. And I can think of alumni who are very dear to my heart, for whom Quakerism isn't their end point, and for whom QVS was an incredible opportunity to grow and change. You all know, I think probably many of you are convinced friends, as are most Quakers, I believe. I think more than half of Quakers are convinced in the US, is my guess. Convincement takes its own path, and there's some ways in which we have control over that, and there's a lot of ways that we don't. So we ask the fellows to lean into Quakerism for a year and then see what happens. So wanted to speak a little bit about fellow demographics, who becomes a fellow, and our equity empowerment work. So we have a director of equity empowerment. Their name is Zenaida Peterson. They use they, them pronouns. They were a fellow back in 2016 to 2017, and they work with all the fellows and the staff. In terms of our demographics, who becomes a fellow, about 80% of our applicants are white, 20% of applicants are Black, Indigenous, and people of color, or BIPOC, B-I-P-O-C. And that's the same with our fellows. Our ratio or percentages of applicants and fellows are pretty much the same, which I think is a good sign. About 75% of our applicants are women, around 13, 14, 15% are non-binary or genderqueer, and then about 15% are men, cisgender men. And we have a real diversity around gender identity and gender expression. In Quaker communities, I think we're talking a lot about racial diversity, and that's been really important to QVS. We also understand class diversity as a place where Quakers can do some work, and because of how racism works in this country, those two things are often related. So, I mentioned some of our gender identity diversity. I'm really proud of that. I think that we're, as a program, very welcoming to individuals of all genders and sexualities. And then we have a number of ways that we support fellows around diversity in class and race. So we have lots of program time and workshops that speak directly about oppression and injustice and how fellows' identities are showing up in their work towards liberation. Zenaida meets regularly with fellows who hold marginalized identities, and they hold affinity group spaces, and then Zenaida also meets one-on-one with staff to talk through issues with an equity lens. And then here there's some financial supports. We know that, although we really try to be a program where fellows have all their needs taken care of, we also know that some people have the opportunity to rely on family support, family financial support, and others don't. So we've tried to make a bunch of opportunities so that everybody is leaving the year without having accrued more debt. The Black Hair Fund, we know it costs more to take care of Black hair in such a way that it's quote unquote professional. And so Black fellows are encouraged to be reimbursed for hair products and hair procedures. We invite fellows to apply to receive discretionary funds. So some fellows have family that can pay for their cell phone bill or can fly them home for a holiday or a family event, and some fellows don't. So this is an opportunity fellows apply. I don't think we've ever said no to somebody when they apply for some discretionary funds. And we have, we've definitely done those specific examples, paid for cell phone bills, visiting family, it can be clothing for work, etc. We pay the interest for student loans. So there are fellows that are coming to us with loans that can be deferred. And so we pay the interest on them, so they're not accruing a larger principal. And then the program completion stipend is something that we changed in the last couple of years. It used to be that at the end of the program, each fellow left and they were given $500 as kind of a like, okay, next step, transition. And we realized that while that was equal, everybody's getting the same amount, it wasn't equitable. For some people, that $500 went towards savings or towards something fun, towards a trip that they were looking forward to, etc. And for others, that $500 was a necessary part of setting up the rest, the next phase of their life. So the program completion stipend now is on a spectrum, and each fellow looks at their class, their background, family opportunities in their future, and they say, what do I need to transition out of QVS? And the sliding scale is between $0 and $1,500. And each year we've done this, it's really cool to see. About 20% of our fellows ask for 0 and say, I can do this transition without any support from QVS. About 20% ask for the full 1,500, and then most people are in between. And it averages QVS at around $700 per fellow. So, did I hear a noise? No, okay. So there's lots of other things we could do. So many other ways that we could support fellows around identity and equity, but this is where we are right now. I think I just have 1 or 2 more slides. So just to tell you a little bit about how QVS works, how do we make QVS happen? We have a mutual investment setup model. So each of our site placements pay Quaker Voluntary Service $18,000 to have a fellow, which is significantly less than hiring a full-time employee and providing benefits. And it also means that supervisors are really invested, and the organization's really invested in the fellow being onboarded well and being supported throughout the year. So site placements cover about half of our program costs. Annual gifts from individuals and friends meetings and churches support the remaining program costs. And there's 50 Quaker meetings and churches around the country that are donors to QVS. I'm really proud of that. I think that 2/3 or so of those meetings are not in one of our program cities, and it shows me that friends understand the positive impact of having a Quaker service program in the world. We're planting seeds that grow at varying rates and in varying locations. Fellows from Boston move to Colorado, they move to Tennessee, they move to California, and they're bringing their experiences with them. They're bringing their experiences to future Quaker meetings, to future cities and nonprofits. And I haven't mentioned a lot about what fellows receive during their year. So they have all of their needs taken care of. We provide housing and transportation, food, health insurance, co-payments, access to mental health providers, and each of the fellows receives a small personal stipend. And it is small. I admit that. It is very small. It's about $150 a month. So they don't have a lot of access to economic resources, but they have a lot of access to relationships and communities. And as one of my coworkers says, that's part of that's the intention. That's not a bug in the program. That's not a problem. The goal is really to have fellows lean into those relationships with local friends and with staff during the year. So we're seeing these seeds grow. We have over 200 alumni. We'll have 230 at the end of this year. And just some statistics, 90% identify with or influenced by the Quaker Way. Around 50% attend Friends Meeting or church. About 1/3 are in communication still with their spiritual nurturer. So that local friend who journeys alongside them. A bunch of them continue to talk on the phone or Zoom. You know, a spiritual nurturer recently attended a Zoom wedding this past summer, and that was sweet to hear about. 90% are still in touch with former housemates. And when this survey was completed about a year and a half ago, a third of them were living in an intentional community at that time, and about a third of all fellows have gone on to graduate school. So let me see. I think that's it. I don't want to talk for forever. So that's the like fast the download, and would love to hear from you all. And I don't know if somebody else is hoping to facilitate her, or Herb, if you were going to do that, but
that was really clear, Hilary. Thank you so much for that.
Great.
A reminder to friends, please be on mute, whether you're live or present or on Zoom. And if you would like to ask Hilary something, please just raise your hand. Wave at me if you're in the large group, because I may not be able to see you. And Hilary, I have a very quick question for you, and that's how is it that you got involved in this? What attracted you to it?
Yeah, thanks for that. I grew up Quaker in New England and was really impacted and informed by the youth group that I attended in high school in particular. And then I went to Oberlin College in Ohio, and I moved back to the Boston area, and I was working on farms, which I loved, really interested in environmental justice and food justice, who has access to food, local food. And I also felt like something was missing. And when this job to be the Boston coordinator appeared in my life, it felt like, oh, this is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for how to be spiritually engaged in my social justice work, and how to be grounded in that social justice work. That like I need a faith community that's doing both and that's grounded in both, and getting to really invest in Quaker communities in this way felt inspiring. So it's been a while. I am glad to be here.
Thank you.
And I don't know how I became the executive director. I don't have any degrees.
Catherine?
That was the first time I'd ever heard somebody call someone a spiritual nurturer. So what is that, a formal term, or is that a movement, or what is that?
Yeah, it's not surprising that it's the first time, because I think we made that term up. So it's a QVS invention. And I think that, you know, there's lots of examples of, and probably you all have these examples, I would love to hear them, of people who helped you in your spiritual journey in some way, who asked you thoughtful questions, who went for walks with you, who shared with you a book that they appreciated, or sent you a poem. And that's really what the spiritual nurture is doing. They're not therapists. They're not there to fix any problems for fellows, but they are there to journey alongside the fellows. So it is a movement that I would love to see. I think that a lot of our friends' meetings and yearly meetings could benefit from naming those relationships. There are certainly people in my meeting and in my yearly meeting who function as spiritual nurturers for a lot of others. And to just name and say, like, I see gifts in you of journeying with others, of being present, of being thoughtful, and helping people go deeper. So I encourage you to spread the term.
Thank you. I can't see who's waving your hand, but please, is that you, Herb, younger?
Yeah, and we gotta hurry before I forget my question. Oh no, I forgot it. You mentioned, I was particularly interested in 50% of the people who enter the program were Quakers, and 60% of the people who end the program were Quakers. Do the other people have a religious affiliation, or are they independents? Do Do we have UU people or Catholics or?
That's a great question. I think that we do have statistics about it, but I don't know off the top of my head. I would bet that some of those folks are involved in spiritual community, and like the anecdotes that I'm thinking of are actually of mostly folks who have gone back to Catholicism, people who grew up Catholic, had some sort of rupture with the Catholic Church and tried out QVS, and then are back in Catholic communities. But there's definitely, I'm thinking of one person who's involved in Methodist community and other in a Jewish community. So I think it's a little bit of both of finding, no spiritual life right now or no spiritual community right now is for them, but also others who something else, some other path is.
I have a follow-up question, as they say on TV.
Yes.
Florida, unlike the Mid-Atlantic, is a collection of smaller meetings. And if we were to do anything, it would have to be as a yearly meeting. Do you have any yearly meeting participation?
Oh, that's a really interesting idea. We don't. The pandemic really changed the world, but definitely changed our program in that it in the past has felt extremely place-based. Like you go to work at your nonprofit, you're living in community, you go to a meeting or church in your city. And so I think the idea of doing something with the yearly meeting never felt like an option, because it would have meant, your spiritual nurture is in a different part of the state, or New England were a bunch of different states. What if your spiritual nurture is up in Maine or New Hampshire? But yearly meeting, there's financial support from yearly meetings. I think that's the way that a lot of folks not in a program city have been involved, or through presentations like this or conversations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Friends,
I can just keep asking questions.
we have about 10 minutes. So if you have something you'd like to ask Hilary or a comment, please do so. But raise your hand so I know who you are.
Vicky.
Hilary, what is it about Quaker spirituality that really speaks to the condition of young adults?
Thank you. That's a really thoughtful question. I think that to me, the marriage of individual spiritual life and community, the necessity of doing that in community is speaks to me, I think speaks to our fellows. Fellows, in Quakerism, we believe we're each in relationship with the divine, spirit, God, love, whatever word, truth, whatever word you use for that. I think that ability to name that relationship individually is really supportive for young adults. We have those who certainly come from a different faith tradition that they feel pretty burned by, that they didn't feel like was welcoming or wasn't the right place for them. And so there's some fellows who really cannot hear the word God, or would not use that themselves. And they're asked to lean into hearing other people use that word. That's a term that somebody else uses. We have fellows who are very Christocentric, who speak about inward Christ. So, and then we have fellows who are pretty atheist, all along the spectrum. And to define that for oneself and to be in community and do discernment together, they're doing pure clearness and clearness committees, and seeing how spirit moves through others in relationship with them. I think that's pretty powerful. And I think being Quakers as a community, having been involved in justice and liberation for centuries, that Quakerism really started from a place of trying to do something differently. Certainly our young adults are deeply invested in continuing that tradition. Thanks for that question.
Nancy Tate.
I just want to comment first that I love that expression, lean into. I don't think I've ever heard it used in this particular way, and it really flushes something out that's important. And I just am so impressed with how pervasive Quaker values are reflected in the program that you've developed and continue to. For example, realizing that everybody didn't need the $500 and reevaluating that and going to a different place with it. A question I have, and you may not be in a position to know, but I would be interested in knowing how much the values of the program, which of course are not strictly Quaker, how much your all's ability to just operate in a way that reflects these actually human values, and how much the people that are in other faith communities are able to take that back and in some way interject it within their faith community.
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. And you're right, I don't have numbers about that. And I do have anecdotes of hearing alumni speak about bringing clearness committees to other faith traditions. And that's really inspiring to me. I think, one of those numbers was how much do alumni identify with the Quaker way. And I think that is kind of speaking to this question of the values. A lot of our fellows already enter with those values. It's not like we're, building them from scratch, but I do think really steeping themselves in Quaker community and in Quaker process does support them in leaning in and trying to be even more intentional. That's a great question. I would like to ask that question of, what have you brought to your faith community from your QVS year?
Nice.
Thank you.
I don't want to go away without telling you how much I admired your PowerPoint. Back in the days when I had a job, I think I remember I did PowerPoints when I had a job. That was really well done, and I hope you didn't do it just for us. But if you did do it just for us, it's an accomplishment for us, because I hope you use it again and again. It was really good.
Thank you. Yeah, it's fun to get to put something together like that. And don't worry, I did have a template. So yes. And thinking about your group and, having learned that most of you are convinced friends really speaks to me and speaks to like, okay, yeah, how can I hope to bring you in, and thank you.
Our newfound digital communication, I think, is just discovering what it can do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, and we're also recording this, so hopefully if other people want to view what this conversation has been, what you've shared with us, that will be easily available to them. I'm excited about that option.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
I have a question. Hilary, what kind of mechanisms do you have in place in terms of screening the non-for-profit organizations to make sure, what I was thinking in particular was some of your non-binary students, trans students, could be put in situations that might be uncomfortable or even threatening in some organizations. Is there a procedure that you go through or something that you do to screen the non-for-profits?
Thank you. That's a great question. So we let nonprofits know. First, I think we could do more with this. We could do more work around this. Each of the nonprofits, we get a number of applications, and normally we have more applications than we have opportunities for fellows. So we get to be a little bit selective. We definitely let all of the nonprofits know that they may have a fellow who's trans or non-binary. And on the application for the fellows, we ask questions like, can we use the pronouns on your application with your potential supervisor? And so trying to hear from fellows, like, what are they comfortable with? Some fellows, we've had fellows who are not out to their family or to, to extended family. And so on our website, we're using one set of pronouns, and at their site placement, they're using another. So there's a lot of nuance. We've definitely found, there's some nonprofits where staff are really on it, and they are super supportive of their trans or non-binary fellows. And but the community that they're working with perhaps doesn't know as much. So I think that's where there's been some more of the tension or the rub is, okay, I'm working, I'm thinking of one fellow who is a gay man, and he was working in a community where there's just a lot of homophobia. And we talked a lot of, he was a fellow that I was the coordinator for, and we talked a lot about whether he wanted to switch his site placement. So I would say at least one fellow per city per year changes their site placement, and he decided to stay. And it's hard to be a coordinator and that discernment, that mutual discernment. I'm like, get out of an unsafe situation. And he's like, no, I want to stay. And he still works in that field. He still is doing this kind of similar work. So yeah, there have been site placements that we have chosen not to work with because fellows have experienced some sort of ism, racism, homophobia, transphobia, etc. Either from staff or more often from constituents that they're working with.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Good question.
I think we have time for one more question, and then we will need to move into silence.
We're arguing with each other about who's going to ask the question.
Someone that has not asked one yet, preferably.
Nancy has. Nancy.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask, and I'm sure this would be anecdotal, but whether you see an impact on the agencies that you're working with from their experience with this program and with these interns.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely see that these organizations are able to do more because of having a fellow. And in terms of, I'm not sure about the question before, what your name is, who asked that.
Nancy.
You want to know my name?
No,
I'm
Greg.
Greg?
Hi.
Greg. Thank you, Greg. So, in terms of Greg's question, certainly our fellow, I'm thinking of one fellow also in Boston who is non-binary, and it was the first time that their site placement staff had ever worked with somebody who uses they, them pronouns, and that staff really leaned in. They were so supportive. They tried so hard. They did not always succeed, but certainly their staff has been changed by getting to work with that fellow, and they hired that fellow after the year. And so I think some of it is this, I know that Boston Healthcare for the Homeless was able to do a lot more case management because of the QVS fellows they had. And I see how the organizations change because of the personalities of each of the fellows.
Very nice. Thank you for your questions, Nancy. They were really good.
Yeah.
I'd like to have us have a few moments of quiet together. And what usually happens between 10:15 and 10:30 is some people hang around and chat. You might want to be a part of that. And some people go over to meeting for worship. So feel invited to do whatever you'd like. Just remember that we are a large community and you may be talking over each other if you're not careful. Okay, let's move into some silence, please. And thank you so very much, Hilary.
It was wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.